It was one of those nasty winter afternoons that makes you question all your life choices. Mid-January, Indiana. A cocktail of wind, snow, and sleet blasted from the northwest, trying its best to strip away any last shred of optimism. I was already running on fumes, both physically and mentally. A week of overtime on a new housing project had me looking more zombie than human, and to top it off, the flu was knocking at my door like a persistent salesman. I'm a carpenter. Been doing it since I could swing a hammer. At 37 years old, I've built more homes for strangers than I care to count, but my own life? That was still very much under construction. Money's always tight. My wife Karen, yeah ironic, had insisted on this big house a couple of years back. 5 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, all the bells and whistles. And I? Like a fool, I agreed. Now, most of my paycheck went toward keeping the lights on in her dream home. Lately, my motivation was a family trip to Florida over spring break. I'd been saving for months, thinking the kids, 13-year-old Tyler and 11-year-old Emma, deserved a real vacation. Truth be told, I was also looking forward to a couple of beers on the beach and maybe a glimpse of college girls enjoying their R&R. Not that it mattered anymore. That day, though, I couldn't push through. Fever, pounding headache, the works. My foreman, Ed, took one look at me and barked, "Get the hell out of here before you keel over." So I packed up my things and headed for my old Ford pickup truck to drive home. I thought about calling Karen, but even dialing her number seemed like too much effort. It was break time, and my old friend Tom took one look at me and said that I would definitely not be able to drive anywhere in this condition, so he would drive me home now and pick me up tomorrow on his way to work. Here's the thing about me, I'm not some Adonis. 6 foot, maybe 220 pounds, closer to 230 after the holidays. Balding? Sure. But I've got the dad bod thing down, and I'm fine with it. Karen, my wife of 15 years, seemed fine with it too. Or so I thought. But when we arrived, her car was gone. Figured she was at the store or running some errands. The house was quiet when I stumbled in. All I wanted was a hot shower, a slug of NyQuil, and maybe Karen fussing over me. She was good at that, her version of maternal instincts kicking in when someone was sick. As I trudged upstairs, I noticed something odd. Karen was a neat freak. Military-grade bed-making skills. But our bed? It looked like 2 raccoons had been wrestling on it. The sheets were crumpled, pillows askew. And then I saw it, a wet, slimy spot on the sheet. My brain didn't connect the dots at first. I was too out of it. But when I got closer, something inside me clicked. The smell hit me next. Not just the smell of sweat or perfume. No, this was different. I froze. Stared at the bed. My bed. Our bed. Karen. I sat there for a minute, gripping the edge of the mattress. 1,000 thoughts ran through my head, most of them fueled by rage and fever. Still, the hot shower called to me, so I stripped down, washed off, and let the water pound my back. It helped, but only a little. By the time I got out, I was angry, angrier than I'd been in years. And tired. I decided to move my stuff into the guest room. I wasn't sleeping in that bed again. Ever. Not even if Karen crawled in on her knees begging for forgiveness. I just finished hauling my clothes down the hall when I heard the garage door. Karen was home. And she wasn't alone. I heard their voices as soon as the door to the kitchen opened. They hadn't seen me yet, but it seemed like they had already guessed that I was home. Hers was unmistakable, a mix of panic and that "everything's fine" tone she used when trying to smooth over her mistakes. The other voice? Male. Definitely male. A little too casual, like a guy who just found his way into the wrong house and wasn't quite sure how to act. My hands balled into fists as I stood in the hallway, listening to footsteps approach. Then, like a deer caught in headlights, Karen appeared at the bottom of the stairs. Her face went pale when she saw me standing there, holding an armful of clothes. "Oh, you're home," she said, her voice shaky. "No kidding," I replied deadpan, shoving past her toward the guest room. She followed me, her steps hurried and clumsy. "What's wrong? Are you okay? You look awful." "I'm sick." "But you already knew that," I said, keeping my tone flat as I dumped the clothes onto the bed. "Where are you going?" she asked, glancing nervously toward the door as if her companion might still be lingering there. To sleep somewhere that doesn't stink of betrayal, I shot back, turning to face her. Karen flinched, her eyes widening. What are you talking about? Oh, come on, Karen. Don't insult my intelligence. Go look at the bed. Then tell me that isn't what I think it is. Her face crumpled, and tears sprang to her eyes. I didn't want you to find out like this. Like this? How exactly were you planning for me to find out, Karen? A nice little postcard from your lover? Wish you were here. My voice was sharp now, cutting through her pathetic attempt at damage control. She slumped against the wall, her hands trembling. It was a mistake. I swear it was a mistake. I didn't want. Don't give me that crap, I snarled, stepping closer. Who is he? Tell me his name. Her lips quivered, and she hesitated. It's Jeff, she finally whispered. Jeff. My mind raced. Jeff. Dr. Jeff Hansen? Her boss? The same guy who'd given her that bonus last Christmas? Well, isn't that just peachy, I said, shaking my head. Your boss, huh? The guy with 3 kids and a reputation for being such a great family man. Tell me, Karen, how long has this been going on? Her tears flowed freely now, but I didn't feel the slightest bit of sympathy. 6 weeks, she admitted, her voice barely audible. 6 weeks, I repeated, letting the words hang in the air. And what? You thought you'd just screw around until it got boring, then come back to me like nothing ever happened. She nodded slightly, like a scolded child. It wasn't supposed to mean anything. He understands me in ways. Don't. Just don't, I said, cutting her off. I'm not interested in your excuses. I'm interested in facts. Is it over? I don't know, she stammered. You don't know. I barked, my voice rising. You don't know if you're done screwing him in our bed? Please keep your voice down, she pleaded. The kids. Don't you dare bring the kids into this. I roared. You've already done enough damage. And you know what? I'll make this simple for you. Starting right now, I'm sleeping in the guest room. You can keep the bed for your lover. Hell, maybe he can help you change the sheets. Ron, please, she sobbed, reaching for my arm. Don't say that. I still love you. This doesn't have to change anything. I yanked my arm away and glared at her. It already has, Karen. You broke our marriage. And now, get out of my way. I need to sleep. I shut the door behind me, leaving her standing in the hallway, crying like the victim she wasn't. I didn't get much sleep that night. Between the fever and the swirling rage in my chest, my mind wouldn't stop racing. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Karen's tear-streaked face or imagined her and Jeff rolling around in our bed like some trashy daytime soap. At some point, I passed out. When I woke up, the clock read 2 a.m., and my stomach was screaming for food. I threw on my robe and shuffled to the kitchen, flipping on the light. Leftovers, it wasn't much, but it would do. I warmed up some meatloaf and mashed potatoes, sat down at the table, and let my mind wander. How did we get here? 15 years of marriage, 2 kids, a big house, and now, this? I wasn't perfect, but I sure as hell didn't deserve this. As I chewed, I heard soft footsteps behind me. Karen stood in the doorway, still in her nightgown, looking like she'd been crying for hours. Her eyes were puffy, her face pale. I heard you were here, she said, her voice small. Are you feeling any better? I didn't answer right away. Just stared at her as I set my fork down and leaned back in the chair. Are you ready to tell me the truth? She hesitated, then nodded. Yes. Good. Then let's start with this. Do you love him? I don't know, she whispered, tears welling up again. You don't know. I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. Well, that's comforting. How about this? Do you plan to keep seeing him? Her face crumpled again, and she covered her mouth with her hand. I don't know. Wrong answer, I said, standing up and glaring at her. Here's what's going to happen, Karen. Tomorrow, I'm calling a lawyer. I'm going to figure out exactly how much of my life you're about to destroy. And after that, you'd better have an explanation that makes sense. Because right now, All I see is a selfish, manipulative woman who threw away everything we built for a cheap thrill. You don't understand, she said, her voice cracking. Oh, trust me, I understand just fine, I snapped. I understand that you didn't give a damn about me or the kids when you brought him into our house. I understand that you thought you could have your little fling and I'd just roll over and take it. But here's the thing, Karen, I'm not that guy. I stepped past her, heading for the stairs. Ron, wait, she called after me. Please, don't do anything rash. Just think about the kids. Think about us. I stopped halfway up the stairs and looked back at her. I already have, Karen. And I'm done thinking. Tomorrow, you'll know exactly where I stand. The next morning, I woke up with a clear head and a plan. Karen had already left for work by the time I got out of bed. Good. I didn't want to see her face just yet. The first thing I did was call a divorce lawyer. I wasn't ready to file, but I needed to know my options. The lawyer confirmed what Karen had hinted at. In this state, a divorce would be messy and expensive. Alimony, child support, splitting assets. It was a financial minefield. But I wasn't about to let her walk all over me. Next, I called my parents. They were furious when I told them what had happened. My dad's voice got that edge it always did when he was pissed, and my mom? She cried. But they agreed to help. They'd take care of the kids if it came to that. After that, I paid a visit to Karen's parents. Her dad looked like he was about to punch a hole in the wall when I told him. Her mom just sat there, shaking her head in disbelief. Whatever you decide, Ron, her dad said, we'll support you. But Karen needs to understand what she's done here. Oh, she'll understand, I replied. The rest of the day was a blur of phone calls and paperwork. I changed the beneficiary on my life insurance, updated my will, and transferred half our savings into a separate account. By the time I got back home, I felt like I'd been hit by a truck, but I was ready for what came next. Karen came home at her usual time, 6:30 p.m., like it was just another day in her perfect little world. She stepped into the kitchen and hung her coat on the chair, not even looking at me as I sat there at the table, waiting for her. The kids were already at my parents' house, so it was just the two of us. She finally glanced my way, her smile fading as she saw the look on my face. You didn't go to work today, she asked, trying to sound casual. No, I replied, my voice flat. I had things to do. Her brow furrowed as she set her purse on the counter. Like what? Oh, you know, I said, leaning back in my chair. Talking to a lawyer. Updating my will. Explaining to your parents what their perfect daughter has been up to. Her eyes widened in panic. You told my parents? Damn right I did, I said, crossing my arms. They deserve to know how their little princess screwed up her life. And mine. She stood there, frozen, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. You've given this some thought, right? I continued, my tone dripping with sarcasm. Because if you thought I was just going to sit here and let you keep screwing Jeff while I pay the bills, you've seriously underestimated me. Ron, please, she whispered, her voice shaking. I didn't mean for it to get this far. I still love you. Can't we just work this out? Work this out. I repeated, laughing bitterly. Karen, you brought another man into our bed. You lied to me. You disrespected me. What exactly do you think there is to work out? She didn't answer. She just stood there, tears streaming down her face. So here's how this is going to go, I said, standing up and towering over her. I'm not divorcing you. If you want out, you'll have to file. But I'm not sticking around to play husband while you figure out your feelings for your boss. Her face turned pale. What do you mean you're not divorcing me? I mean I'm leaving, I said bluntly. You can have the house, the bills, the mortgage, all of it. I've already moved my personal accounts. The kids are staying with my parents for now, and if you can't support them, you'll have to give up custody. Oh, and you might want to talk to Jeff about hiring you, because I doubt you'll still have a job tomorrow. Her jaw dropped. What did you do? I called his wife, I said, watching her face drain of color. Told her everything. She didn't seem thrilled about her husband screwing his secretary. Weird, huh? Oh my God, she gasped, staggering back a step. You didn't. "Oh, I did," I said, smiling coldly. "And while I'm at it, I've quit my job. No income means no alimony. Good luck getting blood from a stone, Karen." She sank into a chair, shaking her head. "You're insane. What are we supposed to live on?" "That's your problem," I replied, grabbing my truck keys from the counter. "Maybe Jeff can spot you a few bucks. Or better yet, you can figure it out yourself, just like I'm going to do." I walked to the door and turned back to face her one last time. "You wanted freedom, Karen? Congratulations. You've got it. Have a nice life." And with that, I walked out the door, leaving her sitting there in the ruins of her perfect little fantasy. The drive south felt like shedding skin. Every mile that rolled under my truck was another layer of my old life peeling away. I didn't even bother looking in the rearview mirror. There was nothing back there worth seeing. By dawn, I'd crossed into Kentucky and kept going, fueled by bad coffee and a need to put as much distance as possible between me and the wreckage I left behind. The Gulf Coast was my destination. Construction jobs were everywhere, and nobody asked questions if you worked hard and stayed out of trouble. That was fine by me. All I needed was a paycheck, a roof over my head, and enough quiet to figure out what the hell to do with the rest of my life. But while I was busy disappearing, Karen's world was imploding. Her first problem came bright and early the next day when Jeff's wife marched into the clinic. Word on the street was that she stormed into the reception area, threw a folder full of printouts onto the counter, and loudly declared that her husband wouldn't be employing his little mistress anymore. Patients and staff alike were treated to a free episode of married people behaving badly, complete with shouting, crying, and a slap that echoed through the waiting room. By lunchtime, Karen was unemployed. The humiliation didn't end there. Karen's parents, already furious after our little chat, refused to help her financially. "You made this mess," her dad told her. "Now you can clean it up." Her attempts to sell the house were another disaster. Between the mortgage, closing costs, and the custom furniture she insisted on financing, there was barely any equity left. She ended up moving into a dingy apartment, her shiny SUV repossessed, and no white knight in sight to save her. Jeff's wife made sure of that. Meanwhile, my parents were taking care of Tyler and Emma. They didn't mince words about Karen's behavior, but they shielded the kids from the worst of it. They gave them stability, discipline, and a sense of what loyalty looked like. I sent money whenever I could, mostly to fund their college savings. Karen tried to rebuild her relationship with them, but the damage was done. Emma barely spoke to her, and Tyler called her by her first name instead of Mom. It wasn't outright hostility, but it was cold. Like distant roommates who tolerated each other out of necessity. For me, life became simple. Work during the day, drink a couple of beers at night, and sleep dreamless until it all started again. I sent cards to the kids on their birthdays, called on Christmas, and avoided questions about when I'd visit. I wasn't ready. Not yet. 7 years later, I finally made the trip back home. Tyler was 20 and studying engineering. Emma was 18 and planning to be a teacher. They turned out better than I could have hoped, and I owed most of that to my parents. Karen was still in town, still working as a cashier at a grocery store. Out of curiosity, I stopped by to see her. Not to talk, just to see. I grabbed a few random items and lined up at her register. She didn't recognize me at first. Her face was lined, her eyes tired, and her once perfect hair streaked with gray. But when she looked up and saw me, all the color drained from her face. "Are you having a good life now, Karen?" I asked, my voice calm, almost casual. She stared at me, speechless, before her knees buckled, and she fainted right there behind the register. I walked out without looking back. The funny thing about revenge is that it doesn't bring closure. Karen's life had fallen apart, but it didn't fix mine. What did, though, was watching my kids grow up strong, honest, and capable. They were my real victory, the only thing worth fighting for. Karen? She was just a cautionary tale. A reminder that every decision comes with a price, and sometimes, that price is everything.